Back, two controversial crime bills targeting D.C. just cleared the U.S. House. The Republican-led measures are fueling debate, even some Democratic support and pushback here at home. One bill, called the D.C. Crimes Act, would end juvenile sentencing for offenders aged 18 to 24 and require public tracking of youth crime data. It passed with the help of 31 Democrats. The other bill lowers the minimum age to charge violent offenders as adults from 16 down to just 14 years old. Supporters say the D.C. Council is too lenient with youth crime, and critics argue the bills undermine the district's right to self-govern. And joining us now is Josh Rovner, Senior Research Analyst with the Sentencing Project. Josh, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. I want to start with the big picture here. Do you see these bills as necessary to address safety concerns or as a federal overreach into D.C.'s right to govern itself?
Well, listen, everyone has a right to feel safe and to be safe in their communities. These bills aren't going to provide that. We have decades of evidence that sending kids to the adult system harms them, harms the 14 and 15-year-olds that we're talking about, and harms public safety. So if we are concerned about public safety, as we all are, these bills are the wrong approach. In fact, these are going to make us all less safe.
Okay, so let's dig into that. If passed, this would dramatically change how young people are prosecuted in D.C. So does it roll back the local reforms? What would it mean for federal control over D.C.'s justice system?
Well, the federal government already has enormous control over the district's justice system under the Home Rule Act. In fact, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, who is appointed by the president, prosecutes adult crimes in D.C. That includes youth who are under the age of 18 who are charged on serious offenses. So this would expand that enormous power that unelected, appointed prosecutor already has in the district to extend that right to 14 and 15-year-olds. So we're talking about what, eighth graders to send them to adult courts in the name of public safety. That's not going to work. We in fact know that they will be more likely to reoffend if they're charged as if they're adults.
Josh, I know you've been following this very closely. From your research, what happens long term when teens are charged as adults instead of going through the juvenile system?
Well, first, let's not confuse what an initial adult charge is with a conviction. So there's certainly a lot of attention at the moment of arrest and the initial charge. More than half of the time in this country, youth is charged as if they're an adult. They're not sentenced as if they're an adult. There's actual innocence, there's plea bargains, there's reverse waivers in most jurisdictions that send many cases back to juvenile court where the cases should have begun in the first place. What's interesting and important to understand is that the district does not have that reverse waiver system. So when we talk about expanding the authority of the unelected prosecutor to choose which 14, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds ought to be charged as if they're adults, there's no check from a judge. There's no way to reverse that decision. And so oftentimes we see those cases just rejected by the courts entirely. And I think that we really need to understand that it's not going to make the district more safe to start more cases in adult court. That's not necessarily where they'll end up. In fact, we've seen the U.S. Attorney's Office being unable to get indictments on some pretty basic charges.
The data shows youth arrests make up about 5% of all arrests in the district, while 18 to 25-year-olds are arrested at twice that rate. So why focus on the younger teens rather than that older group?
Well, look, this country hates its teenagers, right? I mean, we always think that teenagers listen to lousy music and don't listen to their parents. And, I mean, that's things that the older generation said about us when we were teenagers. It's what my grandparents said about my parents. What's important to understand, and we can see this in the data, is the way that youth actually have a pretty slim role in overall crime rates. As you mentioned, 5% of arrests in the district this year are people under the age of 18. Twice as many arrests are people 18 to 24. And in fact, there's more people in older age blocks generally who've been arrested than under 18-year-olds. So it's pretty easy to scapegoat other people's children as being the cause of our problems. Certainly the president and the U.S. Attorney's Office has been eager to single out youth, especially youth of color, for the crime that happens in the district. But we have publicly available data that shows that that's not true. Again, about 5% of arrests in the district are people under the age of 18.
All right, Josh Rovner, thank you so much, Senior Research Analyst with the Sentencing Project. Thanks for being with us this afternoon.